Many people think that you simply can't replicate these great analog sounding drum grooves inside your computer. But I would say there's some approaches to get pretty close. Let's take a look. So we're going to try and recreate the groove that you just heard, which I picked from an old 90s house record. So it was definitely made with some analog tools. And this was the groove that we just listened to. And this is the version I made only in the box. So we get quite close there, I would say. We're kind of going to ignore the chord sound from here on out and focus on these drums that I made. Which are made of this kick, which already kind of has a hi-hat on top. We add a clap. And then some skippy hi-hats on top. So there are many videos out there, including some of mine, that are saying if you kind of add some slight variation, ever so slight variation to your sound, you can get closer to what analog tools sound like, because analog tools are these electronic devices that are imperfect and every sound they put out will be slightly different. So you're creating this natural vibe. And while that's kind of true, these small variations, the effect they have on the overall groove, they're kind of small. So they will add some character. I don't want to negate that, but the impact that they have is not that big. And they're not actually what creates these type of grooves that I like and maybe you also like. There are actually like 4 features, I would say, or some features on analog drum machines, which you can use to intentionally create this type of groove. And I already talked about 2 features, which are kind of volume variations and swing. So volume variation, you can just focus on certain hi-hat hits, for example, over here. This hit is going to be slightly louder than this one leading into the open hi-hat. So this is a closed hi-hat. This is the open hi-hat. So, and the second feature is adding some swing to that. So this is what it would sound like if it were straight. And this is with swing. Okay, so these 2 are already covered. And let's take a quick look at my Electribe, which I have over here, because it does make sense to kind of think of these analog tools for inspiration to create something that would sound like something that would come out of here. So if we take a look, the thing that I just talked about, the volume attenuation, would be this accent over here. So you can sequence various sounds. These would be something where you can put your hi-hats. And so you would say over here, this hit is going to be a bit louder. So we could put an accent on hit number 3 and then this way kind of decide which hi-hat is going to be loud and which is going to be quiet. And then the swing feature, you can just like turn a knob like over here. For each groove, you can just pick a swing setting and it's going to swing the notes in a similar way to what you can do in your DAW. 2 features which are kind of often overlooked, which are just as necessary to create certain grooves, are choke groups. So in this case, we have 6A and 6B. So we have 7 sounds and here you have 2 sounds. And the choke group means you can only play one of these 2 sounds at a time. So if I'm playing A, the moment B comes in, it's going to cut A, and the other way around. The moment B comes in, A is going to be cut. The moment A comes in, B is going to be cut. And then you have 2 things that you can pick from. This kind of comes from like playing a real drum kit, because that's what the initial idea was, to mimic that. A real drum kit, you can only play an open hi-hat or a closed hi-hat, because you have one hi-hat and you cannot do both at the same time. That's physically impossible. So since they were trying to mimic kind of natural way of playing drums, they created these choke groups, right? And you also have choke groups in Ableton Live. Another classic drum machine would be a 909, obviously. And if you pick a 909 kit from your Ableton library, you will see that even though you can actually control the choke groups, if you go to hit this button over here and then hit I/O, you will see there are choke groups, but none of them are selected. And I've seen drum kits from Ableton that actually have these choke groups set up in the same way, but Sometimes they aren't. And this is something that will actually make your drums in Ableton Live work similar to these analog tools. Let's have a quick listen what effect the choke group has, right? So I have these choke groups selected. I have my closed head and my open head, and I put them in the same choke group. Both are in choke group 1. We can make a new MIDI clip over here. And we have our open hi-hat over here. And let's make that long. Now it's playing the full hi-hat sample, right? If we now add a closed head at a point where the open head would still be playing, you can hear how it stops the closed head. So looking at the drum groove that I created, as you see, we have some swing in here and stuff, and the moment the closed hi-hat comes in, it will stop the open hi-hat. And this is like they're taking over, they're grooving together, and that's something super important, which these classic machines use, which will just create this certain vibe. So I urge you to try around with these choke groups, kind of get your settings all right, and then you will get already much closer to this analog groove. The second feature I wanted to talk about, and we're gonna take a quick look at my Electribe again. I have these tubes over here, which you can use to saturate. And not all analog drum machines have this, but when people were working with analog machines because of their tapes and all of this kind of thing, there was a lot of saturation going on, and also in like old mixers, and you could use that to shape the transients in a way to get a very specific sound. So another thing that we can do is really shape the dynamics in a way that our hi-hats don't sound so clicky anymore, but almost seem like they're pulling in and not having this clicky sound that some hi-hats have. So let's actually look at the original track that I was analyzing, and you have this closed hi-hat up here, which we can kind of use as an example. It doesn't sound so clicky and pokey. And in live, there's this cool feature that if you consolidated something, you can find similar files. So why not try and find a similar hi-hat like this one? And you'll notice it definitely comes from like a 909 drum machine. So I kind of picked this sample over here. But if we compare these two, this one is quite attacky and has this click in the beginning. This one also seems like much softer, doesn't sound as clicky and stuff. So the two things that we can do in order to create this transient is either use a bit of a fade, which is not going to exactly have the same impact, but saturation, tape saturation, is usually the key. So we're going to get Saturn and just use warm tape and see what it does to our sound. So let's really crank this up to have a good example and compare it. Listen to that. Do you hear how here it's like tuck, and here it's more like you're losing this annoying attack, and we can even enhance that or do that a bit more by removing some beginning. So compare this, kind of feels snappy, to this, super pokey. So using this to saturate things, you don't only want to use it on the closed hi-hat and kind of saturate your open and closed hi-hats together. So if we jump directly into a drum rack, this would be our normal hi-hat. Here we have our open hi-hat, and here we have the process closed hi-hat. We can also we can add saturation just to this one and really remove some attack to get the sound that we want, but also add some saturation to the whole drum groove. So we are also having this similar impact on the open hi-hat, because the open hi-hat also has this click in the beginning, and you want to have it pull a bit more. So let's listen to the normal, what it would sound without any saturation, our groove, and jump in here for that. Already sounds cool. But let's now put in the processed hi-hat and turn on saturation. It creates a different groove because it's so snappy and so it just creates a certain pull. So depending on how much saturation you want to throw in there, so you notice if you add a lot of saturation, you're completely losing the attack, which is the case in many of these old house grooves. Like, it doesn't feel like this hi-hat is like banging on top of something. It feels more like it's getting pulled in a way. So I would say these are some ingredients that you can use to really create these analog sounding grooves. So just think of your volume variation and your swing, but then don't forget about choke groups, which are definitely necessary to recreate this analog vibe because the analog drum machines use them. And then use saturation to shape the dynamics and the attacks of your samples in a way that creates this certain pulling and groovy vibe instead of like being just super attacky and straightforward. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I see you in the next one.